study the Bible. Please understand why you're Seventh-day Adventist. You're not simply a church that goes to church on Saturday rather than Sunday. For many of us, that's the only difference. No, 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 no. This church was raised up to preach a message no other church preaches. What's that message? God raised it up specifically to make that the central theme of its preaching. All of that would include victory over sin, the intercession of Christ, the divinity of Christ, the humanity of Christ, the divinity of the Holy Spirit, the perpetuity of God's law, it has never been canceled, the central role of the Sabbath, all of that should characterize the preaching of God's people. Satan's original charge against God, according to Revelation from Ellen White, is that God's law cannot be kept. It's impossible to keep this law. That was his charge. He came down, got Adam and Eve to fall, to prove, among other things, see, I told you, your law cannot be kept. Look, Jesus came after thousands of years to show the law can be kept. Are you following me? Now, Jesus demonstrated in his life the law can be kept perfectly. But in the Jewish system, for something to be accepted as reliable, there must be at least two witnesses. In the mouth of two or three, every word shall be established. So Jesus can say, I kept the law perfectly. What do you think Satan will say? I need another witness. Because your system requires two. If you, Jesus, say the law can be kept perfectly, you did it in your life, is there another witness? That other witness has to be the church. Through the power of Christ, we must demonstrate before God comes, we can live in harmony with Christ's law. Through the power of Christ, I said. When that occurs, Christ comes. So our mission is to show the world God's law can be kept perfectly. Thus showing Satan to be what? A liar, and God to be true. When we live in constant violation of the law, whose side are we supporting? Satan. So Satan looks at God and says, you see, Randy Skeete, see, I told you, your law can't be kept. Look at his brother, the law can't be kept. Look at her, the law can't be kept. Look at him, this is fifth wife, the law can't be kept. But there are few who are faithful, and God says, you see her? My law can be kept. My law can be kept. My law can be kept. You pick the side you want to be on. It's not just your life. It is the effect on God if we're faithful or unfaithful. But we as human beings, we think of us. But God is thinking universally. You see, angels don't understand everything. They don't, because they're created. That's why when God told Moses, make the ark, the mercy seat was made of one piece of gold. The angels were made from the same piece. They're facing each other but looking down. What are they looking at? How justice and mercy work together. That's the gospel. There's the law in the ark, the mercy seat above. How can a just God forgive sinners? They don't fully understand. That's in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 9. And to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the world had been hidden in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ, to the intent that unto principalities and powers in the heavenly places might be known by the church the manifold works of God. As the gospel works in us, angels learn. The gospel is unfolded to them through us. So in a certain sense, we can mislead the angels based on how we live our lives. There are unfallen worlds where people have never sinned. God has to prove to them that Satan was wrong. Because Colossians 1 verse 20 tells us the blood of Christ reconciles things on earth and things in heaven. When God threw Satan out, some angels felt he was treated unfairly. And so they viewed God, I'm not sure he did right. Now, they didn't sin, but they had questions about God. In the Desire of Ages, Ellen White tells us it was only when Satan did what he did to Christ at Calvary that some angels finally decided he's no good. So for thousands of years, there were angels who were still sympathetic to Satan. Only when Calvary occurred did they finally decide this guy is no good. Can you imagine that? Sinless, powerful angels. And so God has been trying for thousands of years to handle the sin problem in such a way that the entire universe will be convinced we don't want sin. We want righteousness. When that happens and Christ comes, we will never choose sin again, because we will show God now we're choosing righteousness, not sin. And so sin will never rise again. So our lives are to be lived to clear God of false accusations, not to strengthen Satan's accusations. It's more than me. The death of Christ secured angels. Whatever keeps me from sin on earth will keep angels from sin in heaven. The cross of Christ secured the universe. Not just this little world you can hardly see if you put it next to the sun. Sin was a universal problem. Sin didn't begin on the earth. Sin began in heaven. And so you have to understand, God raised up a special people to assist him in showing the universe that his law can be kept. What is that group? The Seventh-day Adventist Church. And you run around trying to be a Pentecostal? What's wrong with you? You run around trying to be a Catholic or Baptist or Satanist? You've been chosen by God to assist him in convincing unfallen worlds and angels that he has always been right and Satan wrong. Always be conscious of that when you make choices. The reputation of God is in your hand. And so Paul writes in Romans 2:24, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles through you, the church. You see, the unbeliever cannot give God a bad name. He doesn't claim to know God. It is the believer that says one thing and does something else and gives God a bad name. So Paul says that God has a bad name because of the believer. And every time God gets a bad name, in the act that gives him a bad name, Satan gets a vote. My life must vote for God, not Satan.